Farmer Cal Bishop rescues a silent boy he finds in the snow near his ranch, unaware that the child is the son of a federal agent who disappeared during an undercover operation. Because of his good deed, Cal faces community condemnation, loss of land, and public humiliation until federal agents arrive to uncover the truth and protect him. Cal's property is declared a federal safe zone, and his honesty and courage are turned into a symbol of bravery and humanity. Welcome to my channel. My name's Cal Bishop. I'm 45, a wheat farmer tucked into the edge of Redwood County, Wyoming, population so low you could fit us all into the high school gym and still have bleachers to spare. Been raising my son, Luke, since the day the cancer took Anna 3 years back. She was the kind of woman whose laughter stuck to the walls like sunlight. Losing her left a silence that never left the corners of our house. That winter was one of those that feel like the world's turned against you. Early frost in September wiped out half the crop. Then came the combine busting a drive belt I couldn't afford to replace. I patched it up with some rigged miracle of duct tape and desperation. Savings drained faster than a leaky water tank. I'd gotten a third foreclosure warning from the credit union last week, 12 days left before they'd reclaim the land my granddad broke his back on. I was out there hammering a section of busted fence when I noticed it, movement along the tree line, just past the barbed wire where the wind curled the snow like old parchment. At first, I figured it was a deer, but then I saw a figure, small, swaying, staggering more than walking. I dropped my hammer and started trudging through the drifts, heart pounding. It was a boy. Couldn't be been older than 7, bundled in what looked like 3 sizes too small, holes at the elbows, shoes without laces. His face was a mess of grime and tears, eyes wide with the kind of fear you don't get from being lost for an hour. This was deeper, older. "Hey there," I said, kneeling down in front of him, stripping off my coat. "You're freezing. Let's get you warm." He didn't speak, just stood there shivering while I wrapped the coat around him and hoisted him up. He weighed less than a feed sack. Back at the house, I fired up the wood stove, ladled out some of the stew I'd been saving, and set up a cot beside Luke's bed. Luke watched him the way farm kids watch unfamiliar animals, curious but cautious. After a minute, Luke handed him his extra pajamas and offered him that stuffed bear Anna had made from her old flannel shirts. My throat caught when I saw that. Luke never shared that bear. Ever. "We'll figure out where you belong tomorrow," I told the boy as he drifted to sleep, the heat loosening his clenched fists. But even then, something in me knew this wasn't going to be simple. Morning broke cold and sharp, the kind of winter light that looks bright but cuts like a blade. I called the county sheriff's office as soon as I'd fed the livestock and made sure the boy, still silent, still skittish, had eaten. He wouldn't tell me his name, wouldn't speak at all, just nodded when I asked if he wanted more soup. Sheriff's office sent Deputy Raylan, young guy, maybe early 30s, always looked like he was trying a little too hard to grow a mustache. He arrived 2 hours later in a rust-flecked cruiser, lights off but his posture stiff like he was already bracing for a problem. "You found him yesterday and didn't call it until this morning?" he asked, standing in the middle of my kitchen like it was a courtroom. "It was dark," I told him. "Blizzard rolling in. Kid was half frozen. Needed soup and heat more than a long ride on icy roads." He had the boy, who was curled up on the cot beside Luke's bed, the bear clutch tight in his arms. Raylan's pen hovered over his pad like it was waiting for me to mess up. "You said he ain't talked? Not even his name?" "Not a word." Raylan stepped back, unhooked his radio, and called in a description. Dispatch came back with static and a shrug, no missing kid matching that age in a 100-mile radius. "Well," Raylan said, slipping his pad back into his jacket, "we'll need to bring him in for evaluation. Standard procedure." "You sure that's necessary?" I asked. "He's still shaking like a leaf. Let him rest." "Sorry, Mr. Bishop. This ain't up to you now." By noon, the boy was gone, driven off in the back seat of Raylan's cruiser. He looked back once through the window, eyes wide, scared again. I waved. He didn't wave back. By dusk, the whispers had started. Cal Bishop's keeping strange kids out at his place. Always kept to himself since his wife passed. That boy ain't right. He's barely hanging on. Don't even think he sent Luke back to school this week. I went into town for supplies, wire for the fence, feed for the hens, and the hardware store clerk told me they were out. Just like that. The same man who used to share coffee with me during calving season. The diner turned me away too. "No tables right now," the waitress mumbled, even though half the place was empty. Luke didn't understand. "Why are they mad at you, Dad? You helped." I didn't have an answer. Not one that would make sense to a 10-year-old. The next day, things got worse. Sheriff Halley himself rolled up my driveway, this time not alone. With him was a man in a suit and slick boots that had never seen a muddy field in their life. "Mr. Bishop," the banker said without shaking my hand, "in light of recent developments and a re-review of your loan standing, foreclosure proceedings have been accelerated." "What developments?" I snapped. "I brought a freezing kid into my home. You'd rather I let him die out there?" "That's for the authorities to decide," he replied. "You have 72 hours to vacate." They left as cold as they'd come. Luke stood next to me in the yard, watching their car disappear over the ridge. I heard him whisper, "This isn't fair." And he was right. This wasn't justice. This was fear. Small-town fear, the kind that festers in quiet corners and turns neighbors into shadows. And it had landed on my doorstep like a plague. I didn't sleep much that night. Neither did Luke. We'd packed most of the house already, just in case. The power company had shut off the electricity that morning, no warning. I'd managed to get a small generator going in the barn. Not much, but it was enough to run a heat lamp for the animals and power one bulb above the tack bench. We slept out there, tucked under wool blankets, our breath visible in the dim yellow light. Luke curled up against me, still clutching that flannel bear. "Dad, do you think that boy's okay?" I wanted to lie. I wanted to say yes, that Eli, or whatever his real name was warm and safe, surrounded by nice folks who understood him better than we could. But the truth tasted like iron in my mouth. "I hope so," I said. The next day, the paper came. Local child missing again, last seen in isolated farmstead. There was a photo too, grainy and cold. The boy's face barely visible as he was led out of my house, wrapped in my coat. They didn't use my name, but they didn't have to. Everyone in Redwood County knew which isolated farmstead they meant. Sheriff Halley called me in for more questioning. Said they just wanted to clarify the timeline. "Where were you the night he disappeared from the children's shelter?" "Same place I've been all week. Here. With my son." "No witnesses?" "Nope. Just cows, chickens, and a tired old man trying to keep his land." They asked the same questions over and over. Like if they asked enough, I'd trip over my own truth. I didn't. Couldn't. I hadn't done anything wrong. But that didn't matter. Folks avoided me now like I was contagious. Pastor Kelly stopped delivering weekly groceries. The school called to say Luke should take a few days off until things were settled. When I tried to get diesel from Norm's out on Highway 12, he claimed the tanks were empty, though I could smell the fresh fill-up. And my neighbor Frank? The same man who borrowed my post-hole digger every spring? He crossed the street to avoid me. "Frank," I called. He stopped. Didn't look up. "I've known you 30 years. He shifted on his boots. "Maybe you should have just let the sheriff handle it from the start. You saying I should have let that boy freeze?" He didn't answer. Just walked off with that slow, ashamed shuffle I knew from the war, the one you used when you saw something you couldn't unsee. The worst part? Nobody asked why I helped. They only asked why I didn't help differently. By the time sunset came, Luke and I were back in the barn, eating canned chili with a plastic spoon. The house sat empty behind us, lights off, windows boarded, ready for the bank's reckoning. Luke stared into the dark. "Do we ever get to come home?" I brushed the hair off his forehead. "I don't know, buddy. I really don't." He was quiet for a while. Then, in the softest voice, "It's not fair. You helped. You told me helping was always the right thing." I had to swallow twice before I could answer. "It is. Even when no one sees it. Even if it costs everything?" I paused. Even then. Later that night, just before dawn, I heard something boots crunching frost outside. I grabbed my old shotgun, slid open the barn door real quiet. No one there. Just stillness and the smell of pine. But there, on the ground, was an envelope. Inside, a single note. Neat, clean handwriting. "Thank you for saving my nephew's life. We cannot come forward yet, but you are not alone. Help is coming." No name. No return address. Just a sliver of hope where there hadn't been any. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel entirely alone. I must have read that note a dozen times before sunrise. Couldn't make sense of it. We cannot come forward yet. What did that even mean? I'd spent every last ounce of patience trying to keep my son warm and my name clean. Now someone was telling me help is coming? Maybe it was a prank. But the handwriting, precise, steady, didn't seem like the kind that came from a teenager playing games. And something in the way they said nephew stuck in my gut like a splinter. By morning, I folded the paper and tucked it deep into my wallet. It was moving day. I loaded what little we hadn't sold into the back of the old truck, mattresses, kitchenware, the chest with Anna's letters. We'd packed light because, truth be told, There wasn't much left. I left the porch swing hanging in the little garden fence Anna had painted sky blue the summer before she passed. Couldn't bear to touch either. As we finished tying down the tarp, I saw curtains shift across the street. One by one, neighbors peeked from behind glass like ghosts in their own homes. Watching. Waiting. Not a single one of them came to help. But something had changed. They didn't look smug anymore. They looked ashamed. Luke sat in the passenger seat, legs drawn up, arms around his bear. I climbed behind the wheel, started the engine. Then came the sound, low at first, then rising like a dust devil across dry earth. Engines. Not farm trucks. Not sheriff's cruisers. These were heavier. Different. The kind of sound you remember from movies or war stories. I stepped out of the cab and turned to the ridge where the access road curved toward the highway. There they were, 6 matte green vehicles kicking up plumes of dust, moving in a staggered line. Big ones, with armored sides and dark glass. Not military marked exactly, but not local either. They pulled up and spread out in a half circle like they'd rehearsed it. Armed men in tactical gear stepped out, helmets, radios, shoulder patches I didn't recognize. Not National Guard. Not state police. Something else. My pulse quickened. I stood my ground in front of the barn door, one hand behind me where Luke still sat blinking in the early light. One of the men approached. Not young, not old. Calm eyes, clean movements. "Mr. Bishop?" he asked. "Yeah." He extended a gloved hand. "I'm Commander Hayes. We're here for your protection." Those words didn't land right. Protection? From what? I barely had enough left to protect myself. Then, from the third vehicle, the back door opened. And out stepped the boy. Eli. He ran to me, stopping just short, unsure if he could still trust what he was seeing. Behind him walked a tall man in a wool coat and a steel gaze. Civilian clothes, but you could tell instantly this man didn't miss details. His eyes scanned everything. The barn, the truck, the tree line, the neighbors. The tall man spoke. "Mr. Bishop." "I'm Robert Kessler. That boy is my son." I blinked. "You mean?" "Eli," he said, placing a hand gently on the boy's shoulder, "is Elias Kessler. My son. I'm a federal agent. Undercover. Embedded for the past 6 years. 3 weeks ago, we were compromised. During extraction, we were separated. I thought he was gone." He turned away for half a second, gathering himself. Then continued. "And then, you found him." Commander Hayes stepped closer. "Because of your actions, Agent Kessler confirmed Elias was alive. But the media attention and the community backlash exposed you. That's why we're here. The people we're investigating, they don't forgive witnesses." I tried to absorb it all. My knees felt weak. The barn, the eviction, the whispers, they'd all been background noise compared to what was actually going on. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" I asked, my voice tight. "Operational security," Hayes said. "One wrong move would have compromised everything. Dozens of lives at risk, including yours. So I lose everything. My land, my name, my peace, just for doing the right thing." Agent Kessler looked me dead in the eyes. "You didn't lose it. You held the line. And now we're here to hold it with you." They moved with precision, like ants that knew every grain of sand in the field. Within minutes, Commander Hayes had posted guards along the perimeter, one at the gate, another near the barn. A third, tall, red-headed, quiet, set up a comm station on my porch, tapping into satellites I'd only heard about on late-night news. I stood there numb, holding Luke's hand as soldiers secured my property like it was Fort Knox. "Effective this morning," Hayes said, handing me a document sealed with more federal ink than I'd ever seen in one place. "This land is designated a temporary federal safe site. The foreclosure is suspended." "Suspended?" I echoed, my voice hollow. "Pending national security review," he clarified. "And Mr. Bishop, you've also been issued a confidential compensation package for services rendered." I looked down at the envelope like it might bite. For all the nights I'd spent sleeping in barns, shivering beside my son, the world was now offering a blank check for doing the one thing I didn't regret, helping a lost child. Eli ran to Luke, grabbing him in a clumsy hug, and the two boys stood there grinning like the rest of the world didn't matter. That moment, just them, in flannel pajamas and muddy boots, meant more than any paper ever could. By noon, the story broke. The feds had been working fast behind the scenes. A press release went out, scrubbed clean of sensitive details but strong on message. Farmer Cal Bishop provided critical support in a federal operation involving the protection of a high-value minor. They didn't mention espionage or weapons trafficking, but they didn't have to. They released security footage too. Grainy black and white images of me carrying Eli through the snow, bundled in my coat. Those clips played on every screen at the diner, the gas station, even the post office window where they used to tape wanted posters. The town flipped overnight. The same neighbors who once whispered now fumbled over themselves trying to offer help. Pastor Kelly showed up with a crock pot of beef stew and homemade cornbread. Claimed he'd always had a gut feeling about me. Norm from the gas station delivered 2 full cans of diesel on the house. Even Frank. He came up the driveway that evening with his boys and a pile of lumber. "Fence needs mending," he said, not meeting my eye. "Thought we could help." I didn't speak. Just handed him a hammer and nodded. That night, the stars came out bright over the ridge, the way they only do after a storm clears. Agent Kessler found me on the porch. He was dressed down now. No coat, no armor, just a man with a weight finally lifting. He looked over at Luke and Eli playing near the barn, throwing pebbles at tin cans. "My son hadn't said a word since the extraction," he said. "Trauma locked him in. The doctors said it might take years. Maybe never." He paused. But this morning, he looked at me and asked, "Is the farmer safe?" First thing he said since it all went to hell. I swallowed hard. Felt that one like a blow to the chest. "You carried him through snow. Let him sleep by a fire. Gave him your son's clothes and didn't ask questions when he couldn't speak. You didn't just keep him alive, Cal. You made him feel safe." I didn't know what to say. "You're a better man than most I've served with," he added quietly. "And I served with the best." That's when I saw the sign. Someone had planted it that evening at the end of my driveway. Just a slab of wood, painted with careful brush strokes. "Here stands a man who chose kindness, even when no one was watching." I stared at it a long while. Maybe it was true. Maybe I'd just done what needed doing. But somewhere deep down, I finally believed something I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't alone anymore. The next few days blurred like thawing ice on a windshield. Reporters set up just past the gate. They weren't allowed inside the perimeter, but they shouted questions anyway. One of them even tried to toss me a mic while I was feeding the chickens. I didn't answer any of them. I wasn't trying to become a symbol. I just helped a scared boy in the woods. But somehow, that turned into a national moment about right and wrong. The sheriff came by that Wednesday, looking about 10 years older than he had the week before. He shifted on his boots, hat in hand, avoiding my eyes. "We didn't know, Cal," he muttered. "Thought maybe that I'd gone off the deep end?" I said. He didn't answer. Just nodded once and walked back to his cruiser. Later, Agent Kessler approached with papers in hand. "We're finalizing Eli's foster arrangements." I braced myself. "I'd like you to be that arrangement. At least part-time, while I finish the job." That hit harder than the foreclosure notice ever did. "You sure?" I asked. "My son asked to stay here." That's all the answer I needed. Luke took the news better than I expected. Just smiled and said, "We'll share chores." That evening, folks started leaving things by the fence. Cards, flowers, even a carved wooden eagle from the high school shop class. No one rang the bell. They just came, left something, and stood for a while before walking off. It wasn't pride I felt. It was something quieter, like maybe the town remembered how to be human again. By the end of the week, the soldiers had mostly packed up. Just one remained, posted near the barn, sipping coffee and reading paperbacks like he belonged here. The improvements they left behind didn't go unnoticed. My irrigation lines had been replaced, the busted tractor now ran smoother than it had in a decade, and the old barn had a new steel support beam where Rot used to live. Compensation, Hayes had called it. Didn't feel like charity. Felt like a thank you nobody had words for. Luke and Eli settled into a rhythm. Morning chores, schoolwork, slingshot competitions behind the silo. Eli still didn't say much, but he didn't have to. He smiled more now. Laughed once at breakfast when Luke spilled milk across the table. First laugh I'd ever heard from him. Kessler stopped by every few days. Each time he arrived, he looked a little less like a government man and more like a dad figuring out how to breathe again. "You ever think," he said once, sitting on the porch beside me, "how kindness isn't rare, it's just quiet? Folks talk about it like it's a miracle, but it should be ordinary." I nodded. "But it ain't. Not yet." He stared across the field. "We make it that way. One kid at a time." That night, after the boys went to bed, I stood at the kitchen sink, looking out over the land I almost lost. It didn't feel like just my farm anymore. It felt like something rebuilt, rooted in sacrifice, yes, but also in grace. Saturday morning brought a soft breeze and something new at the fence line. A wooden sign. Same post as before, but the old message was gone. In its place, This land stands because one man did not walk away. No name, no signature, but it stopped me in my tracks. Luke noticed it too. He didn't say anything, just reached out and held my hand. Later that day, the school principal called. She wanted to meet. She apologized, real words, not empty ones. Said she'd misjudged. Said the school was proud of Luke. Of me. You taught your son to act when others hesitate, she said. That matters more than grades. The following Sunday, the church invited us back. I hadn't stepped inside since Anna's funeral. We went. Sat in the back row. Nobody stared. After the service, Pastor Kelly pulled me aside. I didn't speak up when I should have, he admitted. You deserved better. I told him, what's done is done. But what's next is up to us, he replied. That night, Eli came into the kitchen while I was drying dishes. He tugged at my sleeve. You didn't let go, he said quietly. When I was too tired. In the snow. I nodded. Dad says that makes you a hero. I knelt beside him. No, son. I just held on until you could stand. And for the first time, Eli wrapped his arms around me. I didn't need a medal. That moment was enough. Spring came earlier than expected. The snow melted fast, soaking into soil that hadn't known peace in a while. I walked the fields with Luke and Eli, pointing out the seedlings poking through, tiny things, stubborn and green. Life, rising where so much had almost ended. The boys had chores now. Eli fed the chickens, Luke hauled feed. They bickered like brothers and looked out for each other the same way. Whatever had broken inside Eli was slowly knitting back together, day by day, under the sky. The town kept showing up in small ways. Frank dropped off a coil of fencing wire. The diner packed extra sandwiches in our lunch order, just in case. Even Norm at the gas station left a can of coffee in the back of my truck without saying a word. They were ashamed, I think, but also trying. And that counts. One morning, Agent Kessler came by, not in his usual black SUV, but in an old pickup that rattled like mine. He walked the field with me, hands in his coat pockets. I turned in my reassignment paperwork, he said. You're leaving. Not exactly. I'm staying nearby. I want Eli to be here, part-time, full-time, whatever he needs. He looked toward the barn, where Eli and Luke were trying to build a treehouse from spare lumber and wild ambition. He smiles here, Kessler said. He trusts here. That doesn't happen twice. I didn't say anything, just clapped him on the shoulder. That night, as dusk rolled in and the frogs started singing near the creek, I watched the boys chase fireflies with jars in hand, their laughter echoing across fields once filled with silence. We weren't rich. We weren't famous. But we were whole. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. 1 month passed. Then another. The military faded from the headlines, and so did I. But some things stuck around, like repaired fences, warm meals from strangers, and 2 boys who now called each other brother, like it was always meant to be that way. The land held up through spring. Good rain, steady sun. The wheat grew clean and tall, just like it used to before frost and doubt tried to steal everything from us. Eli stayed. Official now. Fostered under my care while Agent Kessler worked nearby. He visited often, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to sit quietly on the porch, watching his son help Luke gather eggs or fix the latch on the goat shed. Folks in Redwood County changed too. A little. Slowly. They stopped whispering. Started waving more. Some even brought by tools they borrowed 5 years ago and finally felt the guilt to return. One morning, I found another note pinned to the old fence gate. The right thing is rarely the easy thing. But you didn't blink. You carried what others dropped. No signature. But the handwriting matched the first note, the one I'd found that cold morning outside the barn. I keep both letters in a drawer next to Anna's old Bible and Luke's first drawing of the farm. They remind me that decency still breathes, even when it gets buried under fear, doubt, and the noise of people who never saw the whole picture. Not long ago, a national paper ran a story. Small-town farmer becomes federal asset in historic rescue. They asked for an interview. I said no, because it was never about being remembered. It was about not forgetting. Not forgetting that a scared child stumbled out of the woods, and I did what any good man should have done. Not forgetting that truth matters, even when the world decides you're guilty before asking a single question. Not forgetting that kindness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's just a farmer, kneeling in the snow, saying, "You're safe now." And sometimes, that's all it takes to turn the tide.